As George Knapp started to become synonymous with UFO reporting, he started to look outside the U.S., specifically at Russia.
So there comes this high-level Russian scientist to Las Vegas. We have a couple of beers, I ask him about UFOs. You ever hear anything about it? He goes, no, don't think so, doesn't ring a bell. We have one more beer. He goes, you know, now that you mention it, there's a friend of mine at KGB who said he had worked on a report about UFOs and some documents. I could ask him about it. I said, you think there's anybody else who might know in the Ministry of Defense? Well, I know all those guys, I could find out. So he said, yeah, I'll do it.
Behind the scenes, George planned a high-stakes trip in 1993, with Russia in turmoil and sources ready to talk.
We're there 10 days. We were pulled over by cops 7 times. There were people stationed outside of our rooms at the hotel. I would put little traps to see if they went through my stuff, which they did every single day. We met with this guy, Boris Sokolov, who had been the head of what was then the largest UFO investigation conducted by a government in the history of the world. There was a period of 78 to 88 where the Russians had these dramatic UFO incidents, and they decided to create a program to get to the bottom of it. And man, well, that was really something. I won't explain exactly how I got access to the files, but I did. Thousands of pages from the Russian Ministry of Defense. Many of those pages were classified at the time. So then we had the problem of how to get it out.
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
It was pretty tricky.
What did you do?
Well, these documents, in those days at least, the Russian Ministry of Defense would stamp classification on the top page of the document, and the rest of them weren't marked at all. It was clear they're military documents, but without that classification, it's a lot less onerous and dangerous. I just removed the top pages of all those documents, and I threw the rest of it in my suitcase, with some caviar, by the way, which they told us we were not allowed to take out caviar. So I threw some caviar in there as a diversion. And it worked because they opened it up. They're looking, hey, caviar, not allowed. Close the suitcase back up. And then the other pages, I carried through security. I carried on my person. If they'd caught me, I'd still be there in a gulag somewhere, but they didn't. And the goal was, maybe we'll find out more from the Russians about what our government knows about UFOs than we'll ever learn from our government itself, which is true. We did.
George started sharing his findings with key players in Washington and his friends, Senator Reid and Robert Bigelow.
I'd asked Colonel Sokolov, what's the interest? What are you trying to do here? And he said, it's really simple. These craft can do things that we can't. They fly circles around our best aircraft. We know they do the same thing to you. And we figured if we could find one, figure out how they work, we could kick your ass in terms of stealth technology, because at that point we were way ahead of them.
3 years later, George returned to Russia and came back with even more bombshells.
I interviewed this guy named Maltsev, who'd been commander of the entire Russian Air Forces. And he told me about these encounters that Sokolov had recounted. 40 different incidents where Russian warplanes chased UFOs, and boom, they were gone. In 3 of those cases, though, the Russian warplanes crashed. 2 of the pilots died. And after that, this guy Maltsev issued an order, leave them alone. You see a UFO, leave them the hell alone, because, quote, they have incredible capacities for retaliation.
More than 25 years later, a Pentagon whistleblower shared the exact same fears that George reported back then, a secret Cold War with some of our biggest enemies.
We're in a competition with their adversaries to understand this. It's a multi-decade Cold War that has been under our nose for so long, and there is no good way to level the playing field and hold other nation states accountable if they're doing unethical or illicit activity as it relates to this subject. And I think the obtuse secrecy is actually putting us in a very dangerous position where a country might make a breakthrough, let's say it's an adversary of ours, and it is so destabilizing.
In June 2023, a worldwide exclusive interview on News Nation revealed alleged secrets within our own government.
What conclusion did you come to at the end of your time on the UAP task force?
The UAP task force was refused access to a broad crash retrieval program.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
How many?
Quite a number.
You're kidding.
No. I thought it was totally nuts, and I thought at first I was being deceived. It was a ruse. People started confiding in me. They approached me. I have plenty of current and former senior intelligence officers that came to me, many of which I knew almost my whole career, that confided in me they were a part of a program. They named the program. I've never heard of it. And they told me, based on their oral testimony, and they provided me documents and other proof, that there was, in fact, a program that the UAP task force was not read into.
I've been told that there have been attempts to bring down Kraft.
There have been instances, and there are certain techniques.
Have human beings been hurt or killed by a non-human intelligence?
While I can't get into the specifics because that would reveal certain U.S. classified operations, I was briefed by a few individuals on the program that there were malevolent events like that.
Including this never-before-seen moment where Grush describes the roadblocks he says he faced when trying to pry for answers.
You're telling us we're being lied to.
Yeah, it's an obvious intelligence community disrespect to the legislative branch, and I tried to gain access in my official capacity, and I had one agency say, "Oh yes, we have what you're looking for. We'll reach in." And then 2 months went by. They wouldn't return phone calls. They wouldn't return inquiries by the UAP Task Force Director, my colleagues with the same kind of statutory authority to investigate this. And in one case, they tried to kill all my security clearances from that particular agency as almost like a show of force, like, please don't ask again, Dave. And I thought that was extremely unprofessional.
And yet you were legally entitled to seek this information.
I stated my official capacity to look into this. This wasn't me trying to get access to a program I wasn't supposed to or anything like that. This was in my official capacity.
Grush's story, first shared publicly in June, was actually known to George well before then.
I had been told I might be introduced to somebody. I'm sitting at a bar and they're shooting video of me, just cutaways. And at that exact moment, while they're getting video of me, Dave Grush walks up and introduces himself. And we started a conversation and got to know each other. And we've been talking ever since. And boy, he shared with me something that I wasn't allowed to make public then, but it was in his whistleblower complaint, what he had filed with the Inspector General, because at that point they were already coming after him. Now, he had come to that conference to meet people, to learn about UFOs, to interact with UFO world a little bit, and to interact with Jay Stratton, who was, the guy who had given this assignment. He didn't come alone, though. Grush came with his boss and his boss's boss. They also went to this thing. They knew what he was up to. They knew what he had found. They haven't come forward, which is interesting that nobody's asked them questions about what he was doing or whether it was legitimate. But they were there because they knew what he'd found and they wanted to support him. We've heard these stories for years, that there's reverse engineering, crash saucers, UFO secrets stashed in there, hidden by the use of hundreds of millions of dollars of national security dollars that are unaccounted for, that Congress has no idea what it's being spent on. Go find it. And he did. He had the clearances to go into those special access programs, interview the people, put them under oath, get their testimony, collected it all, and sent it up the stairs, up the chain of command. And once it became clear what he was doing, what he was going after, he was messing with the fundamental forces of nature. These are powerful interests that have this stuff. The keepers of the secrets are real, and they're not going to give it up, so they came after him.
Coming up,